Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Bonsai Escape. My name is Mike G and I'm going to show you one of the easiest trees to work with as a beginner and one of the funnest trees as a experienced bonsai enthusiast like myself. So stay tuned. All right, enough suspense. Let's get to the bottom of this. What is one of the easiest trees as a beginner or one of the funnest trees to work with as an experienced bonsai enthusiast like myself? It is the Portulacaria Afra. Basically, they call it the baby jade. It gets its name because it's not a jade tree actually. It's a different species, but it does look like a jade, and I think they call it a jade because it is a succulent and it looks kind of like a jade, but it's not. It's very distinguishable by its small green leaves, which makes it ideal for bonsai, and it has these really nice contrasting red stems. This is a cutting I took from the tree we're going to work on back in January. It's only been 5 months. The cuttings I'll show you a picture of. They started in little cups like this, 3 in a cup. I'll show you the batch of cuttings I pulled this from when I was trimming this Afra Portulacaria back in January in my house, and then rooted them and have then since separated them into individual cups, and that's why I have now 25 individual cups of Portulacaria Afra. So here are the cuttings. They were literally little stubs about that big 4 months ago. And they have exploded with growth. When they were potted in the little cups, I had 3 in each and decided to repot them after 2 months being in the cups, and they've now exploded with growth and have growing out of these pots. I have a few that were potted in these little bonsai training pots because they were a little bit bigger cutting, but considerable difference in growth. And what makes these trees such an ideal specimen for bonsai? One of those is the fact that they grow really fast. And even though I've been doing bonsai for 20 years and I've learned the art of patience to an extent, we all get impatient with our trees and we want them to grow fast. We want to see some significant growth. Most of us start with the juniper, and it's the slowest, longest process. It's like watching paint dry. But these guys explode quickly. This was not more than a few leaves 4 months ago, and look at the size of it already. Another ideal candidate for bonsai is the fact that Portulacaria, they don't need to be watered. So most people typically get confused with watering and either overwater or completely neglect and forget to water their trees. With the Portulacaria, as long as you have good draining soil, there's no organic soil in this. This is pretty much just lava rock and pumice. As long as it's fast draining, you can water these almost every day as long as the water drains out. And most people can just neglect it and forget about it. You don't have to water them for weeks. These sit in the sun almost from 8 in the morning till 7 o'clock, 7:30 at night. Full sun all day, and they thrive in it. And so if you're someone that wants to enjoy an awesome growing, fast growing bonsai, and that's a little nervous about the green thumb aspect and taking care of all this, then I really recommend a Portulacaria Africa, or they call them the baby jade trees. And I'll show you one of my specimen baby jades, or my Portulacaria Afra trees, and I'll give you a little demonstration on how to trim it. It's really kind of cool. So this is I would call my specimen Portulacaria Afra baby jade. I actually took this from a cutting on a branch that I found that was broken. It was about half this size. I'll show you a picture. And I didn't really know what to do with it, to be honest. 20 years of bonsai work, and I neglected these, meaning I overlooked them. I didn't really think of them as bonsai because I thought of them as jades, and jades take on a little different characteristics as far as their growth. They still are succulents, but this one, these grew all over California, and I just walked by, never really paid attention to them until one day I said, you know what, let me just see if this thing even roots. Long and behold, I stuck it in some pumice and lava rock soil mix, really nothing more than that, and wired it in to keep it from moving. And in about a month it was rooted, I could tell. And then I transferred it from about a month into from a pond basket into this pot, and it hasn't been out of it since. It's been 2 years in this pot, and it has blown up. Now in Southern California it's very hot, a lot of sun, and this is why they thrive here. Now that I'm in Michigan, this tree doesn't do well in the cold, in hot, humid climates, wet climates, and that's essentially what Michigan is. But from spring through fall, we get gorgeous hot days like 80 today, 80, almost 88 today in the middle of spring. This goes inside. The minute temperatures drop below 50 at night, it goes inside, and it stays inside all winter under grow lights, and it stays about 70, 75 inside the house. The ideal condition for this tree is a dry climate, hot dry climate, which is what the indoor temperatures really give you. So this tree thrives all winter long. I fertilize it almost every time I water, which tends to be about every month, or I'm sorry, every week or two. Right now I water it maybe once a week. In the winters, because it's not as hot, I might do that every 2 weeks, but it can literally dry out. This tree is up for repotting this summer. I'll wait till the summer to repot it, just to ensure I have a lot of hot days. But this, the soil isn't draining very well, which tells me it's pretty much root bound in here, and that's how fast it grows. But this was just trimmed in February, and it just kind of is starting to lose its style. So we're just going to do a little style trimming just to get it back to its shape. A lot of these branches that are extending out grow from all different directions, and we're just going to have fun trimming this up and getting it back into its pretty shape. So really quickly before I start, I'm just going to show you, you can tell that I've developed some pads, lower pads, these middle pads, and all the way around. It has a lot of dimensions, 3-dimension, has very good ramification of each branch structure, these secondaries and tertiaries to each side. It's really just looking at finding a balance. And the apex is kind of getting out of growth. It's got a long extensions on it here and here, over here. So I'm just gonna prune this back and just get its shape back. Anything that's growing down like this little guy, we'll cut that off, and then I will talk a little bit more about that in a second. Enjoy. Let me try to explain a little bit of how I'm trimming this. Here's a branch that is growing straight up from the center. And on each branch, as you trim a branch, I'll give you an example. These Portulacaria, they're very uniform in that they have foliage or leaves emerging from one direction and then exactly perpendicular the opposite direction, and they alternate all the way up the branch. So here you can see we have these going this direction, and then these going this direction, and then these going this direction. It's a constant switching back and forth. So on the tree, when I cut this, if I were to cut this top one, leaving the two that are pointing at you and away from you, if I cut the top one off, I will get two emerging buds or branches coming out from those heading in the direction that they're pointing. And so if I cut down below this, I will get two emerging branches coming from the two directions going the opposite way. And so this is what we mean by directional pruning. I hope you're able to see that. That's what we mean by directional pruning. So as I'm trimming this, as I'm watching the foliage come out toward me, I'm cutting any branches that are extending beyond the focus of this pad and how I want it to develop. But for instance, this top one, I don't want a lot of height in my pads, so I will cut back to one of the internodes, the lower internode there, just to level it. Same thing here, way down. That's two branches I've cut off, or 2-3 sections of the leaves, internodes. You can see this guy is crowding everything, so I'm going to cut him all the way back to the stem. opening that trunk line up, and probably the trunk line of this secondary branch too. This one's filling out, and as you can see, as something was cut, I don't know if you can see in here, as something was cut, two new ones start emerging in the opposite path. And so this is all it is about cleaning up the growth from the last trimming that comes out smaller and more refined. And so we're already getting some shape back to this pad. The only thing I don't like is this downward growth, so we'll cut this off. But I also want to consider one thing. If we have a pad and the tree's natural tendency is to grow up, and we start cutting anything that's growing down, because that's what we've been told, cut anything growing down off, then these trees or these branches that are growing up will just continue to grow up. We can keep going, getting out, but it'll be a staggered upward growth. If we let something underneath grow out, it'll start eventually turning itself up, which gives it a little more flatness to that pad. So the last time I trimmed this, those were my thoughts when I was trimming it. And I think I'm going to actually leave this lower pad down here, this branch. I left it there for a reason last time, and that was the reason. I want to get more work coming underneath the pad, so to fill out the pad lengthwise, but not necessarily upward rise, if that makes sense. So I'm going to leave this little section down below. It's not the ideal. Anything that's pointing down, so for instance, I've got some foliage here pointing down, and again, I left a lot of this stuff the last time for this reason, but any of these little leaves I will pluck off. So if anything's hanging down, that's like, for instance, this pad right here has a leaf, a branch with a leaf pointing down, I literally just pluck it off, and it gives it that flat section of the pad, and then we can get the fullness on the top of the pad. So that's what I'm working through on this bottom pad here, and I'll just continue to keep working on it. And here's a good example of branches that are extending out, and it's starting to crowd this lower pad. I want light to this lower pad. If I don't allow that to happen, you can see how much growth has come out toward this. So now I've got up and down vertical and horizontal leaves. If I cut this one off, I'll end up directing the paths this way. So I'm going to cut back all the way to the horizontal one, which will help start getting more branching out toward me. And again, I'm cutting most of this stuff back to the closest internode to the last cut, just to encourage more growth. This one's a little too long, and we'll figure that out in a second. A long one in the back here. Getting very bushy up here, so I am going to cut this back, thinning this area out. Getting a couple branches that are merging together here. We'll let that one continue to go from the bottom for that purpose, but I do want to cut this back because this is getting that upward rotation. So I'm going to be a little drastic here, and I am going to cut back, and I'll show you why. You notice this tree, this branch here is coming out, and then it curved up, and now it's curving up again. And so I got nothing coming from underneath. As this one starts to come out, it'll start coming back up, and that's what I'm looking to do. That's what's happening over here. So if I eliminate this section, it's going to leave a hole there, but within a month or two it'll fill out, and I've got some growth behind it coming right here. That'll help bring it out. So at a risk of being excessive, I've learned that with these guys you can be pretty significant in your trimming, and she will bounce back with vigor as long as you keep it hot, dry, and in a lot of sun. I'm just cleaning up these other pads here, trying to make a decision. I'm hesitating on this, but I think I am just going to cut it back to at least here. There you go. Now that's gone, and it opened this whole section up, but I'm getting growth from, I'll be getting some growth from this area. I'll be getting more growth out of this, and then eventually this guy will turn up and start to fill this in. And so we actually did good with that. There's a long guy. I want to shorten that one up. I think we'll go to here. Got another one that's turning up. I don't like that. I want to cut that guy off. We got a long one coming out. I did want to cut that back. And so basically there's an example of how this will bifurcate. Last cut, we had the two here. I snipped, and then we've got branches coming out. There was a cut here at that level where the horizontal branches are, or leaves are, and it gave us two extensions. And if I cut it again up at this horizontal place, it would give us two more, and then so forth and so on. That's what we call ramification. If I cut it where they're pointing the opposite direction, we'll get them in the opposite direction. So that's what we look for when we're cutting these, developing these pads. And I always want the branches to be going horizontally, not one up and then down and up and down. As the pads have developed and this has ramified and grown out, we start getting into situations where they're just going everywhere, and I'm just looking at the best possible situation to allow it to grow however it wants, because that will fill in and give it a more natural look as to not one direction with branches, like maybe a maple or an elm looks a lot better when you see that ramification. But if we were to defoliate this entire tree, you'd see really nice ramification. In fact, it's the only time I'd probably want to defoliate this is to look at that ramification and then start selecting some of these upward growing shoots. And again, a big goal of mine is to lower the section of the canopy of this branch, this pad, to allow more sunlight in and to get smaller leaves, smaller internodes, sections between the leaves, because I do heavily fertilize this tree, and I continuously fertilize it. It grows very fast. So that's what I'm looking for. That pad is pretty cleared out. This pad up here is getting pretty cleared out, but you can see how, as I was mentioning, this portion of the branch was coming down and it's starting to come up, and it just will keep going up. So my goal is to eliminate that. I want to cut this down to here to start. I probably won't even go lower than that. I might go to the next internode, which is not that far away, right to here, to start encouraging something to come out from underneath and then branch up. This branch that's extending back, it's actually starting to touch the other pad, and it's not really, you can see down in here maybe how it's going out and then it curls up and then curls up. And again, that's what we're trying to avoid. And so I've got to make some decisions on that, how I want to let this develop. I could clear the top off and let the bottoms grow out, but I'm thinking this is getting to be a long branch to this back too. So here we go. I'm going to be aggressive with this, and I'm going to cut it back to this internode right here. That's a pretty significant chunk, but now we're going to get some branching off of this and it'll start coming down. But this is a side view. Here's the pad from this direction. And again, this is one of the problems with this tree and the way it grows. That's why I'm leaving these lower branches, because I need to eliminate this guy and let these come out and become the new leader of that branch, to keep it from curling up, but to flatten it. So as aggressive as I've been, I might as well continue that process, and we're going to eliminate this one too. Now we've got the lower growth coming up, and we're going to get that flatter, straighter pad. And that's what I'm looking for as I'm going through this. I'm looking for any really aggressive extension on these trees. Sorry about that. Yeah, that pad's starting to come into shape. You can see it's a lot flatter. So anything that's not necessarily growing down like these guys, I am going to keep these. I might actually get rid of this guy. He's going straight down. This guy's coming down and will eventually come up. But what I'll look for is like this little leaf that was hanging down. I'll pluck that off. I just want a clean appearance underneath. And so this branch right here, if I were going to leave that branch, I would just pluck this off. I would just pluck this guy off. And now I'm getting a cleaner line underneath the branch. So continuing this, let's just keep going. So there's a quick structural pruning for this Portulacaria. As you can see, the pads have leveled out. I've got some hanging down things like this where I would just snip that out, little branch. But underneath is flat. Anything that's pointing down, these little foliage tips, pop them off. We said we were going to keep some of these guys, but I am going to clear the bottom ones out. And the pad should look smooth underneath. I've trimmed the tops of these off because they do get so thick that it blocks sunlight. But this is a very, very healthy tree. Very important not to just let it go forever, because as I was doing this, I actually found a few scale insects that aren't typically on this tree, although I have found them on my ficuses. But it looks like this guy got bent down at some point and it's growing down, so we'll let that be. But that was a quick little structural pruning of this Portulacaria. And what's interesting is this pile can now all become cuttings. Most of these cuttings in these cups started about this big. I put about 3 in each cup, and now look at them. They're more than tripled in size. So I'd love to do it. I just don't have room to continue building more and more of these. But I'm not going to lie, I'll probably take a couple of these and use it. Something that's already got some thickness to the trunk, why not, right? I'll probably sort through there and pot those up. But other than that, I'm just going to let this keep going. It's already in a relatively nice design shape, and it's just a matter of growing and thickening. I'm leaving this one on the bottom. In fact, I should probably cut this guy off here. I'm going to let this guy develop and come up to support that upward growth like we were talking about. We got one that's coming straight up I don't like, but this is probably one of the funnest trees to work on because you do get a lot of growth. You get to play with it and snip and trim it all the time, and it will come back even with more vigor. One of the big things I've been doing, now you can see almost through the foliage pads now, you get smaller needles, smaller leaves, you'll call them leaves, and I'm leaving this one little sap sucker on the side. I'll probably cut it off now and repot it. I was just letting it grow for the heck of it. It's not going to be any part of this design, but it's just another branch that I can cut off and propagate, and maybe I'll show you a quick video on that. I've got this section here that needs to be filled out, so I'm going to actually cut this off here. I want to fill this section in here with that pad. But other than that, I think we're on a pretty good pace. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you have, hit subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.